I never imagined I'd go to sleep in a cardboard box one night and wake up a millionaire the next. Yet there I was, sitting on a faded bench outside the city library, watching rain puddles collect at my worn sneakers, trying to figure out how I even got here. My life had been a series of wrong turns, betrayals, and near misses, but nothing prepared me for the twist that would change everything. My name is Alex Harper, and for the last 3 years, I was the kind of person everyone walks past without a second glance. Homeless, invisible, broken. I had lost everything: my job, my apartment, my dignity. Every day was a test of survival. Every night a battle with the cold, the hunger, and the gnawing loneliness that clung to me like a second skin. And then there was Nathan, my older brother, or at least that's what the DNA on our birth certificate says. Nathan Harper, with his tailored suits, polished shoes, and a laugh that could charm the birds off a tree. He was everything I wasn't: successful, ruthless, and comfortable in a world that had spat me out. He had been my only family after our parents died in that tragic car accident years ago. Yet the connection we shared had always been complicated. "Alex, you're still alive," he had said the last time we saw each other, over a year ago. His smirk didn't reach his eyes. It never did. I wanted to hate him, wanted to scream that he'd abandoned me when life got hard, but I couldn't summon the energy. I had nothing to give him, and he knew it. That night, curled in a damp blanket beneath the flickering streetlight, I heard the news from someone I didn't even know. My estranged uncle, a man I'd met only twice as a child, had died unexpectedly, and apparently he had left something for me. Something big. The first time I heard the figure, I thought it was a joke. 36 million, a fortune I had never touched, never dreamed of touching. My mind reeled. How could a man I barely remembered care enough, or have enough trust, to leave me that much? And why me, not Nathan? I tried calling Nathan. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. But when he picked up, his tone was smooth, practiced, almost casual. "Alex," he said, almost too easily. "I heard the news. Looks like the family has a surprise for you." His pause said more than his words. There was a glint in his voice, a sharpness beneath the politeness. And in that moment, I felt it, the first flicker of unease. Something about Nathan's interest in my inheritance didn't sit right. He didn't sound happy for me, he sounded calculating. I spent the night pacing my tiny, makeshift corner behind the library. Questions slammed into my mind faster than I could answer them. Why now? Why, after all these years of ignoring me? What exactly had my uncle left behind? And why would Nathan be so interested in my reaction? The streets around me were quiet, except for the occasional distant siren and the drip of rain from the rusted metal roofs above. But in my chest, my heart was racing, wild with anticipation and fear. Something was coming. Something that would pull me out of this life of dirt and desperation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't the only one being watched. Nathan's shadow loomed larger than ever in my mind. Was he genuinely excited for me? Or was this another one of his schemes, a way to control me, to make me play a part in a game I didn't even know existed? The thought made my stomach knot. I shook it off, tried to focus on the numbers, the legal papers, the possibilities. But deep down, I knew one thing for certain: nothing about this windfall would be simple. And nothing about Nathan would be what it seemed. That night, as the city lights reflected off wet asphalt and a cold wind whispered promises of change, I finally allowed myself a single thought, whispered under my breath: my life is about to change. But at what cost? And somewhere out of sight, Nathan was already moving the pieces. I thought the call from the lawyer would be the turning point, the moment my life would finally shift from cold streets to endless possibilities. I imagined bright lights, crisp suits, and maybe, just maybe, a life I could call mine. But instead, what arrived first was doubt, wrapped in a polished smile, and too many questions I wasn't sure I wanted to answer. The lawyer, a neatly dressed woman named Clara with perfectly manicured nails and eyes that seemed to miss nothing, explained the details of my uncle's will. 36 million, divided across multiple trusts and properties, with certain stipulations for its release. And that's when Nathan appeared, not at my side, but in every phone call, every email, every meeting. At first it seemed normal. After all, he was my brother. But subtle things began to creep in almost immediately. The first red flag came during a meeting at the law office. Nathan arrived wearing his usual tailored suit, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and an air of ownership that made the room shrink around me. "Alex, congratulations," he said, clapping me lightly on the shoulder. "I've been telling everyone about your good fortune. Can you believe it? My little brother finally catching up?" I forced a smile. "Thanks, Nathan. I still can't believe it myself." But even as I spoke, I noticed how he didn't make eye contact when Clara mentioned certain clauses in the will. Clauses that, if misunderstood, could prevent me from claiming my inheritance. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, as if savoring a private joke I wasn't part of. Then came the secret calls. Whenever I tried to speak with Clara alone, Nathan somehow always found a reason to step in, sometimes claiming, "I just want to make sure Alex understands everything." He smiled, but the smile was sharp, the kind that made you feel small and cautious at the same time. One evening, after a particularly long day of signing preliminary documents, I walked past the cafe across the street and saw him talking into his phone, lowering his voice whenever he saw me glance in his direction. The conversation ended with a clipped, "Almost hostile, yes, I know what to do." I didn't hear the rest, but the tone had been enough. My stomach twisted. What exactly did he know to do? And why didn't he want me to hear? Money, I realized, was becoming the wedge between us before it even arrived. Nathan started showing a sudden interest in the minor details of my life. How I spent my last few dollars. Whether I had a bank account, what debts I owed. Every question seemed innocent, but each one left me uneasy. He was probing, testing boundaries I didn't even know existed. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just excited, just trying to help me navigate something he had experience with. But small things began piling up. Invitations I received from him often came with strings I couldn't quite see. One night, as we sat in the quiet of my temporary apartment, a single room I had rented for a week while dealing with the lawyers, I noticed Nathan casually rearranging a stack of papers on the table. "You know," he said, glancing at me without looking directly, "I've always had to protect you from yourself. Wouldn't want something to slip through the cracks, would we?" I laughed nervously, but inside I felt a chill. Was it protection or control? The emotional strain began building. Every decision I made felt scrutinized. Every step forward in the inheritance process carried a shadow of doubt. I wanted to trust Nathan, wanted to believe that my brother truly cared. But my instincts screamed otherwise. Even my sleep was affected. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, heart hammering, images of Nathan leaning over documents, whispering instructions, plotting unseen moves in a game I didn't fully understand. I felt powerless, like a puppet whose strings had been pulled long before I even knew the show had started. There were moments of small kindness too, an unexpected dinner he took me to, a car ride through the city, but they felt rehearsed, like distractions meant to make me doubt my own suspicions. Every compliment, every gesture seemed to carry a hidden agenda. One day Clara handed me a statement of my uncle's assets. Nathan hovered behind me, his arm resting lightly on the back of my chair. I tried to focus on the numbers, the properties, the trusts, but all I could see were his eyes. Calm, calculating, patient, watching, waiting. "Looks like a lot to handle, huh?" he said softly, leaning closer. "Don't worry, I'll help you." Wouldn't want anything to go wrong. I wanted to believe him. But the words echoed in my head later, twisted into something else. Wouldn't want anything to go wrong for him. Not for you. Every time I tried to speak with him about it, to express my unease, he would laugh softly, shake his head, and dismiss it as paranoia. "Alex, you've been through so much. Don't let this sudden fortune get to your head. I'm just looking out for you." And yet every time he smiled, every time he offered help, I felt it again, the quiet, suffocating sensation that something was not right. That behind the charm and the polished words, there was a plan I didn't understand. And I wasn't sure if I would see it before it was too late. Even the world seemed to conspire with my unease. Friends I contacted for advice seemed nervous when Nathan's name came up. They asked if he had always been like this, if he'd been controlling before, or if I was imagining things. My own self-doubt became a constant companion. Was I just paranoid, or was Nathan really hiding something? Every day became a balancing act, between gratitude and suspicion, hope and fear, love and the creeping realization that my life-changing inheritance might not just bring freedom but danger. And somewhere in the shadows of my thoughts, I began to understand that I was not only fighting for my future, but also for my sanity. The first red flags had appeared, subtle but undeniable, and as I lay awake that night, counting the raindrops against my window, I whispered a warning to myself: trust no one completely, not even family. But Nathan Harper, my brother, was already setting the stage for what came next, and I had no idea how far he was willing to go. It all came crashing down on a Thursday afternoon, when the first hint of daylight through my grimy apartment window couldn't soften the blow. I had spent the morning reviewing a stack of legal documents Clara had provided, trying to make sense of the tangled web of trusts, properties and stipulations that stood between me and the $36 million my uncle had left behind. For the first time, it all felt real, until I saw it. Nathan. He wasn't in the room with me physically, but every word he had ever said, every helpful gesture, every smile, suddenly revealed itself for what it was: a carefully crafted lie. I stumbled across an email thread accidentally left open on my laptop by Clara. It was between Nathan and a senior attorney at the firm managing my uncle's estate. The subject line alone made my chest tighten. Plan for Alex's inheritance. Controlled release. As I scrolled through the messages, my stomach dropped. Nathan had been systematically trying to manipulate the will to divert the majority of my inheritance into accounts I couldn't access. He had drafted amendments, hidden clauses, and even suggested delaying payments under the guise of protecting me from poor decisions. Every reassurances, every offer of guidance. It had all been a setup. I felt my hands shake, the edges of the laptop blurring as rage and disbelief collided inside me. All these months, all this time, he was planning to steal from me. The betrayal cut deeper than I had anticipated. This wasn't a simple argument between siblings or a disagreement over money. It was deliberate, premeditated, and personal. Nathan had studied my vulnerabilities, my lack of experience, my desperation, and he had exploited every weakness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm into his office, tear him from his comfortable chair, and demand answers. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had no power, no leverage. He had been patient, calculated, waiting for me to feel secure enough to let my guard down. And I had fallen for it completely. The emotions came in waves: heartbreak at the deception, rage at the manipulation, disbelief that someone I had once trusted could betray me so completely. For a moment, I sat frozen, the laptop open on my knees, staring at the messages as though they had become physical wounds. And yet, buried in the fury and despair, a small, icy spark of determination flickered. I had been invisible on the streets, ignored by the world, treated like nothing. But now, for the first time in years, I realized that I had something to fight for: my life, my dignity, my inheritance. And I was not going to let Nathan Harper, polished and powerful though he was, take it from me. I remembered the nights spent under cardboard roofs, the hunger, the cold, the endless struggle to survive. Nothing in that life had prepared me for this kind of betrayal, but it had taught me one thing: resilience. And that resilience was now my weapon. I reached for the phone, dialing Clara. My voice trembled slightly, but my words were firm. Clara, we need to meet now. Something's wrong. He's trying to take everything. The pause on the other end told me that Clara understood immediately. She promised to come over within the hour. As I waited, I paced the room, mind racing. How had Nathan done it? How had he managed to convince not just lawyers but everyone around us that his version of events was legitimate? Every carefully constructed lie flashed in my mind. The dinners, the casual comments, the smiles that masked his true intent. He had been orchestrating this for months, maybe even years, ensuring that when the time came, I would be unprepared. When Clara arrived, her expression was a mixture of shock and professional concern. We sat, papers spread across the small table in my apartment, and she walked me through the plan Nathan had devised. Every amendment, every hidden clause, every subtle nudge to delay or misdirect me. It was all there, laid bare. I could feel my blood boil. Nathan hadn't just betrayed me, he had weaponized my trust, turned our shared history into a trap. And the more I realized the scope of what he had done, the more I understood the danger. If I made a misstep, the fortune that had seemed like salvation could disappear completely. Alex, Clara said quietly, placing a reassuring hand on my arm, you have options. We can challenge this, contest the amendments, and protect what is rightfully yours. But you need to stay calm, and you need to be strategic. Nathan is smart, he won't make it easy. I nodded, though my mind was already racing ahead. Calm, strategic, that was going to be the key. I couldn't let my anger blind me. Couldn't give Nathan even a hint that I understood his plan. Not yet. Yet the heartbreak lingered. The thought that my own brother, the one person I should have been able to trust above all else, had betrayed me in such a calculated way, it was almost too much to bear. I wanted to hate him completely, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I clung to a shred of disbelief, a fleeting hope that maybe somehow this was a misunderstanding. But deep down I knew better. Nathan had chosen his side. And it was not mine. I thought about my uncle, who had clearly intended this inheritance for me, despite Nathan's interference. The thought ignited a fire within me, a sense of responsibility not just to myself, but to the man who had believed in me enough to leave me this fortune. I owed it to him and to my own future to fight back. By nightfall, I was no longer just Alex, the homeless man who had wandered the streets, invisible to the world. I was Alex Harper, the rightful heir, fully aware of the enemy sitting just a few miles away, plotting and scheming as if nothing had happened. And I knew one thing for certain: Nathan had underestimated me. As I sat back, staring at the dim light of my apartment, a quiet resolve settled over me. Rage was useless on its own. I needed a plan. I needed allies. And most importantly, I needed to make sure Nathan never saw me coming. The betrayal had been revealed loud and clear. The question now wasn't if I would reclaim what was mine, it was how. And somewhere across the city, Nathan Harper was smiling, unaware that his carefully constructed plan had just awakened something far more dangerous than he could imagine. I couldn't sleep that night. My small apartment, usually my refuge, felt suffocating, the walls closing in as images of Nathan's betrayal replayed over and over in my mind. Every detail of the emails, every calculated gesture, every sly smile, they haunted me. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to run straight into the storm I knew Nathan was orchestrating. But something inside me whispered a harsher truth. Rage alone would not win this. Rage would only make me visible, predictable, and weaker. For the first time in months, I let myself sit with the hurt, the despair, the sense of betrayal that had clawed at my chest since discovering Nathan's emails. I thought about the streets, about sleeping under bridges, about how I had survived the world when no one else had noticed I existed. If I had made it through hunger, cold, and desperation, I could survive this too. And then it hit me, the realization that would change everything. I had spent my entire life being reactive, letting circumstances dictate my existence. Homelessness had taught me endurance, patience, and observation. Nathan had always had power, polish, the world in his hands, but I had something he didn't, nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. This inheritance isn't just money, I thought. It's my future, my freedom, the life I deserve, and no one, not even my brother, will take it from me. The fire inside me that had been smoldering under grief and rage now ignited fully. I felt it in my chest, a rhythmic pounding that drove the despair out and made space for clarity. I would not cower, I would not beg. I would not let the past define me, I would act. The trigger moment came unexpectedly. I walked past a small park near my apartment, and saw a man handing a sandwich to a young boy who had been begging at a street corner. The child's eyes were wary, almost suspicious, but the man's patience, his gentle tone, and the small kindness of the gesture reminded me of something I had lost sight of. Strength doesn't always roar, sometimes it's quiet, calculated, relentless. And that's when I understood. My fight with Nathan couldn't be about emotion. It couldn't be about shouting, confronting, or exposing him immediately. It had to be about strategy, observation, precision. He had spent months studying me. Now it was my turn to study him, to anticipate, to strike at the right moment. I returned to my apartment with renewed purpose. I dug through every document Clara had given me, cross-referencing details, looking for weaknesses, hidden clauses, inconsistencies, anything Nathan might have overlooked. The lawyer's calm voice over the phone became my guide, but the determination came from within. I wasn't a desperate man anymore. I was a man reclaiming what was his. Every memory of my time on the streets fueled me. The nights I had gone without food reminded me how to endure. The moments I had felt invisible reminded me how to observe. The fear, the humiliation, the cold. They had forged a resilience in me Nathan could never touch. And for the first time, I felt truly capable of turning the tables. By the following morning I had a plan. Not a complete plan but a framework. I would challenge Nathan's influence over the lawyers, quietly gather allies who could verify my claims, and document everything meticulously. Transparency and timing were going to be my weapons. Nathan thrived on manipulation and deception. I would thrive on preparation and foresight. I even started small, testing the waters. I made calls to contacts who had previously helped me survive in ways I never thought would come in handy. Law students, former coworkers, and even an old journalist friend. People who had been underestimated like me. People who understood how to navigate systems stacked against the powerless. As the day progressed, I noticed a shift in myself. The heaviness that had pressed down on my chest since discovering Nathan's betrayal had transformed into a calculated energy. I could feel my thoughts aligning, focus sharpening, and every instinct I had honed on the streets now ready to serve a new purpose. The anger that had once threatened to consume me was now a tool, driving precision rather than chaos. Even simple tasks carried new significance. Organizing documents, reviewing emails, and making discreet inquiries, all felt like building blocks toward reclaiming my life. Every time I thought of Nathan, the image of him in his pristine office, smug and confident, fueled my determination. He had underestimated me. He thought my homelessness and desperation meant weakness. But he had no idea how strong I had become. That night I stood by the window, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the wet asphalt, and whispered to myself, I am not just Alex Harper, the man who once slept on the streets. I am Alex Harper, the rightful heir, and I will not be denied. The transformation wasn't sudden, it was gradual, emotional, and natural. It came from facing despair, acknowledging betrayal, and realizing that survival had already equipped me with every tool I needed. Nathan's scheme had been cruel, yes, but it had also been the catalyst that reminded me who I really was. By the end of that week, I had mapped out key points in Nathan's plan, anticipated his moves, and lined up allies who could intervene at critical moments. My heart no longer raced with panic. It beat with strategy, with intention, with the confidence that comes from knowing that the first move in a battle doesn't have to be reactive. It can be deliberate. And in that transformation, I discovered something else. Betrayal may have shattered my trust, but it could never shatter my will. Nathan Harper had assumed he was playing a game he controlled, but he had forgotten one essential truth: I had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The streets had forged me. Betrayal had ignited me, and now, nothing could stop me from reclaiming what was mine. By the following Monday, I had a clear objective. Nathan Harper had stolen from me, and I would reclaim every dollar, every asset, and every ounce of dignity he thought he could manipulate out of my hands. But this wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about precision. The streets had taught me survival, but betrayal had taught me strategy, and now strategy would be my weapon. The first step was gathering proof. I went through every single email Nathan had sent to Clara, every note, every phone record, every signature on documents he had tried to manipulate. I realized that in his arrogance, Nathan had made one critical mistake. He assumed I lacked the attention to detail to notice subtle discrepancies. But I did notice, and I was compiling evidence meticulously. I created a timeline of events, when he had started interfering, the dates he contacted the attorneys, even the times he had sent secret instructions. Each entry was precise, documented, and cross-referenced with phone records, timestamps, and witness statements. I wasn't just building a case. I was constructing a mirror that would reflect Nathan's deception in the harshest possible light. Next, I set subtle traps to confirm his motives without alerting him. I sent carefully worded emails to Clara, dropping hints about decisions I supposedly intended to make regarding the inheritance, all designed to see if Nathan would react or attempt to intervene. And react he did. Within hours I received a cryptic message from him: "Be careful. Don't make mistakes you'll regret." It was polite on the surface, but the underlying threat was unmistakable. I realized then that Nathan still believed he was in control. That arrogance would be his undoing. He thought I was weak, that I would stumble under pressure, that my recent wealth and lack of experience meant I could be manipulated easily. But I had spent years surviving the streets, watching, learning, listening, waiting. I knew the power of patience, the importance of timing, and the value of preparation. I recruited allies cautiously. First was Clara, whose calm professionalism had already proven invaluable. I explained my plan and she agreed to assist discreetly, keeping Nathan unaware that I had uncovered his scheme. Then came an old journalist friend, Max, who owed me a favor from a time when I had helped him cover a small story in the city. Max was skilled in investigation and exposure, perfect for documenting the full extent of Nathan's manipulation without tipping him off. Step by step, the plan took shape. Gather emails, phone records, legal correspondence, and witness statements that clearly prove Nathan's interference. Use small, controlled moves to bait Nathan, confirming his intent and methods. Build a public or legal narrative that would leave Nathan vulnerable without giving away my strategy. Leverage legal counsel, investigative journalists, and trustworthy intermediaries to ensure no single point of failure. Anticipate Nathan's counteractions and have contingency plans ready. Every night I stayed up late, reviewing documents, cross-checking inconsistencies and refining each step. I began noticing patterns in Nathan's behavior: how he tried to charm people into compliance, how he avoided direct confrontation, how he relied on assumptions about my inexperience. And I made a mental note of each weakness, each predictable move he might make, and each opportunity to exploit it. The tension escalated when Nathan, sensing some shift, started making subtle moves of his own. He would call Clara unexpectedly, ask pointed questions about my understanding of the will, and occasionally make vague threats about delays or complications. Every word, every gesture, was carefully calculated to intimidate. But I didn't flinch. I had anticipated this. I was ready. To test his reactions further, I deliberately leaked false information about a property I intended to claim. Within hours, Nathan tried to interfere, submitting unauthorized instructions to the law firm. Clara immediately notified me and we documented his interference. That single move confirmed his intent beyond doubt. And it also gave me the proof I needed to show a judge that he had been manipulating the inheritance illegally. Simultaneously, I set up a network of observers, friends who could discreetly monitor his public appearances, interactions with attorneys, and any unusual financial activity. Every small piece of information added to the growing mosaic of evidence. Nathan was still convinced he was ahead, still smiling behind his polished demeanor, unaware that the walls were closing in. As the days passed, my confidence grew. The emotional turmoil that had once clouded my judgment was replaced by methodical precision. Each calculated step not only advanced my position but also strengthened my resolve. The streets had taught me endurance, betrayal had taught me cunning. And now, armed with both, I was ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. One evening, as I reviewed the latest batch of documents, a chilling thought crossed my mind. Nathan had underestimated me in every way. He had assumed my past homelessness equated to weakness, that my lack of experience equaled compliance. But he had forgotten something fundamental. The man who had survived the streets and clawed his way back from nothing was now fully aware, fully prepared, and fully determined. The tension in the air was palpable. Nathan still believed he controlled the board, the lawyers, and the narrative. He didn't know that every move he made was feeding my case, building the evidence I would need to expose him completely. He had played the first act, and I had spent months meticulously learning the script. Now it was my turn to improvise, to turn his arrogance into his downfall. As I closed my laptop that night, exhaustion mixing with exhilaration, I whispered to myself, he thinks he's winning. He has no idea the storm he's about to face. The plan was in motion, each step carefully orchestrated, each reaction calculated, and each alley ready. The streets had prepared me for survival. Betrayal had prepared me for revenge. Nathan Harper might still feel in control, but I knew something he couldn't predict. The fight for what's right can't be beaten by polish or charm. And soon he would find that out the hardest way possible. The courtroom was silent, every eye on Nathan Harper, who sat with his usual polished composure, completely unaware that the storm he had so meticulously avoided for months was finally upon him. The walls, the polished wood, even the sun slanting through the high windows seemed to lean in, as if the universe itself had conspired to witness this moment. I stood beside Clara, my hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was the culmination of years of struggle, betrayal, and planning. Nathan had underestimated me, believed my past misfortune meant weakness, and now he would see exactly what happens when the invisible man rises. The judge called the session to order, and Clara began presenting the evidence. Every email, every secret instruction Nathan had sent to the attorneys, every attempt to manipulate the will, meticulously documented and cross-referenced, was laid bare. Screens displayed his own words, time-stamped and undeniable. The courtroom air seemed to tighten as each revelation hit. Nathan's smugness began to falter, his eyes darting to the documents in disbelief. "Your Honor," Clara said, her voice calm but firm, "the defendant, Nathan Harper, deliberately attempted to divert the inheritance of Alex Harper, the rightful heir, through manipulation and concealment of critical legal documents. The evidence shows a premeditated plan to deprive him of his uncle's estate." Nathan opened his mouth to respond, but I could see the cracks forming. The confidence he had wielded so effortlessly began to crumble under the weight of facts, witnesses, and irrefutable proof. The arrogance that had guided his every move now became his undoing. Then came the moment that sent a ripple through the entire courtroom. Max, my journalist ally, presented a timeline of Nathan's actions, accompanied by phone records, hidden correspondence, and witness statements from lawyers and staff who had observed Nathan's interference firsthand. The images on the screen juxtaposed Nathan's words against his deeds, his charm and smiles now exposed as instruments of deception. I felt a surge of vindication, but I kept my composure. This wasn't about gloating. It was about justice. And justice had a way of speaking louder than any words I could utter. Nathan tried to interject, claiming misunderstandings and procedural errors. But the room had shifted. The subtle unease that had once hung over me in his presence now engulfed him. His carefully curated image of control was dissolving in real time. Clara guided the judge through the most damning piece: the unauthorized amendments Nathan had submitted. They were clearly forged with intent to mislead, and the signatures, timestamps, and instructions all pointed directly to him. The court murmured in disbelief, even the stenographer paused, as if to let the gravity of the moment sink in. I finally looked at him directly, and for the first time in years, I felt no fear, only clarity, power, and an undeniable sense of triumph. He had taken from me in secrecy, tried to manipulate my life, and now the entire system he had tried to control was watching his unraveling. The judge leaned forward, scanning the evidence, then glanced at Nathan. "Mr. Harper, do you have any comments regarding the documentation presented? These actions, if proven, constitute deliberate obstruction and fraudulent manipulation of the inheritance process." Nathan's voice, once smooth and commanding, cracked slightly. I was only trying to help." A hush fell. Everyone could see the desperation in his eyes. He was cornered. The carefully constructed veneer of control he had relied on for months, or years, was gone. Then Clara delivered the final blow. "Your Honor, Alex Harper is the rightful heir, and all assets, trusts, and properties outlined in the will must be transferred to him immediately. Mr. Nathan Harper's attempts to divert the estate are null and void. The courtroom erupted in stunned whispers. Nathan sat frozen, the color draining from his face. He had been outmaneuvered not by brute force or luck, but by patience, strategy, and determination. As the verdict was read and the gavel struck, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The man who had once seemed untouchable, the brother who had betrayed me for greed, was now exposed for the world to see. His influence diminished, his plans thwarted, and his arrogance shattered. Even outside the courtroom, the repercussions were immediate. News of the case spread quickly. Colleagues, friends, and distant relatives who had once admired Nathan now whispered in disbelief. The social veneer he had cultivated for years crumbled under the harsh light of truth. His assets and professional reputation were no longer secure. Every move he had made to manipulate my inheritance was now public knowledge. For me, it was more than just money. It was vindication, closure, and a reaffirmation of the resilience that had carried me through years of hardship. Standing there, finally acknowledged as the rightful heir to my uncle's estate, I realized the journey had transformed me. From the streets to this courtroom, every struggle, every betrayal, and every sleepless night had led to this moment. Nathan, who had once been my brother in name, only avoided my gaze. His pride, carefully polished for decades, lay in ruins before everyone who had once respected him. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same wealth and power he had used to manipulate others now became the instrument of his public humiliation. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs, I allowed myself a small private smile. The city that had once ignored me, that had watched me struggle and stumble, now witnessed my rise. The streets that had forged my strength had led me here, and betrayal, which had once threatened to destroy me, had only sharpened my resolve. I paused, glancing back at the courthouse. Nathan's downfall was complete, financially, socially, and morally, and I understood something essential. Revenge was not about cruelty, it was about justice, patience, and the satisfaction of seeing truth prevail. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. The $36 million inheritance was more than just money. It was a symbol of survival, of resilience, and of the power of rising above betrayal. Nathan had believed he could control everything, but he had underestimated the one thing he could never predict: my will to fight back. As I walked away from the courthouse, I whispered under my breath, letting the words echo in the crisp air, "You took from me in secret, Nathan, but the world has seen your truth, and I am unstoppable." The weeks that followed the courtroom showdown felt surreal. The city seemed to breathe differently around me, as if it had taken notice, finally, that I was no longer invisible. Nathan Harper had retreated into the shadows, a polished image now fractured beyond repair. His influence had crumbled, his reputation tarnished, and every boardroom conversation or social gathering that once carried his name now whispered of deceit and disgrace. For me, the $36 million inheritance was more than just wealth. It was the key to freedom, a validation of resilience, and proof that survival wasn't just about enduring hardship, but about using it to emerge stronger. I had once wandered the streets, unnoticed and desperate, but now I moved through the city with purpose, recognized and respected not just for the fortune I inherited, but for the strength and determination that had earned it. I invested in projects I believed in, supporting shelters for the homeless, funding scholarships for underprivileged youth, and starting a small initiative that helped people who, like me, had been written off by society. Each success, each grateful face, reminded me that my rise wasn't just personal, it was a ripple effect, changing lives in ways Nathan could never comprehend. And yet, the sting of betrayal remained a quiet shadow. I often found myself thinking about Nathan, not with anger anymore, but with a sense of poetic closure. The arrogance he had wielded so effortlessly had been his undoing. He had gambled on my inexperience and my desperation, only to discover that patience, resilience, and meticulous strategy could turn the tables completely. One evening, I walked past a familiar street corner, the same corner where I had once begged for scraps of food and fought to survive the biting cold. The memories hit me like a tidal wave. The shivering nights, the endless hunger, the isolation. And yet those memories no longer carried shame. They were the foundation of the man I had become. I stopped for a moment and whispered to the wind, "I have walked through fire, and now the world knows my strength." The legal aftermath had been decisive. Nathan faced penalties for his interference with the will, his attempts at forgery documented and publicized. Beyond that, his social network had begun to shrink, colleagues distanced themselves, and friends who had once admired his charm now avoided him entirely. The same man who had tried to control my life had lost control over his own. Meanwhile, my own life blossomed in ways I hadn't anticipated. Opportunities I never dreamed of began to appear: board meetings where my insights were sought, invitations to speak at charitable events, and recognition from people who had dismissed me before. I was no longer just Alex Harper, the man who survived, but Alex Harper, a symbol of perseverance and triumph over betrayal. There were quiet moments, too, when I allowed myself reflection. The anger I had carried initially had been useful, a spark that ignited the planning and execution of my revenge. But now, it had been replaced by clarity and a calm sense of justice. Nathan's downfall wasn't about cruelty, it was about balance. The world had corrected itself, and I had been the instrument of that justice. In a private conversation with Clara, she smiled knowingly. "You did more than reclaim your inheritance," she said softly. "You reclaimed yourself." I nodded. She was right. Beyond the wealth, beyond the victory in court, I had discovered something invaluable: my own strength, my capacity to rise above betrayal, and the ability to turn pain into power. Nathan Harper had underestimated me completely, but I had emerged not just unbroken but stronger, wiser, and unshakable. One afternoon, I received a letter, formal, concise, and cold, from Nathan's legal representative. It detailed his continued attempts to appeal, but by now the momentum was firmly on my side. The evidence was undeniable, and the public exposure ensured that any further attempts to undermine me would be met with scrutiny. He had lost before he even tried again. I sat back, gazing out at the skyline, the city alive with its usual hum, yet different to me now. I had taken my pain, my past, my betrayal, and transformed it into something unstoppable. Nathan Harper had destroyed the possibility of trust between us, but in doing so, he had also unleashed the very strength he had hoped to suppress. As I reflected, a thought crystallized, a line that would stay with me forever, a reminder that betrayal can never extinguish the human spirit. Those who build their towers on the deceit of others often forget that the ground they stand on can crumble beneath their own feet. I smiled, letting the truth of those words sink in. Nathan had believed himself untouchable, but his downfall was proof that arrogance and greed carry their own penalties. Meanwhile, I had risen, not just to reclaim what was mine, but to embrace the life I had always deserved. And to anyone watching this story unfold, anyone who has faced betrayal, injustice, or manipulation, I have one message. Don't let the pain define you. Let it sharpen you. Let it guide you towards strength, strategy, and resilience. You may feel powerless, unseen, or broken, but remember, even the smallest spark can ignite a fire strong enough to change everything. So tell me, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Did it leave you shattered? Or did it teach you something you couldn't have learned any other way? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your stories, and if you've been inspired by this journey from despair to triumph, make sure to subscribe. There are more stories where resilience, justice, and clever revenge meet reality, and you won't want to miss them. The streets that once defined me, the betrayal that once crushed me, and the inheritance that once seemed impossible, all are part of my story now. I am stronger, I am free, and I am unstoppable, and somewhere, far from the courtroom, Nathan Harper can only watch as the consequences of his greed ripple outward. A reminder that the seeds of betrayal always bear bitter fruit. The man who tried to steal everything from me now stands empty-handed while I, once invisible, have become unstoppable.